3. Imperium Romanum. On yet another night the stars shone upon the empire. In Britannia, the cities of Aberacum, Londinium, and Virile Amium were still bathed in twilight, and so it was in Galatia, Lusitania, Hispania, and Mauritania. The stars were taking over from the very last of the day in Cordoba, Scalabus, Gades, and the Punic cities of Timgad and Lambazes. In each of these locations, various occupying units of the Roman army prepared for the night, along with the natives of the land. In Gaul, the university city of Massilia was already lost to the darkness, as were Lugdunum, Narbo, Bertigala, and Lutetia, and Vindobono was also in darkness. In Thrace, there were Adrianople and Marcianopolis to be guarded, and Thessalonica, Aenus, Moronia, and Abdullah. In Greece, there was Athens, Sparta, the gay Corinth. In Egypt, there was of course Alexandria, the more seemingly valuable because there was no regional establishment to compare it with. And in Asia, there was Pergamum, Smyrna, and the rival cities of Nicomedia and Nicaea along the Black Sea. There were Ephesus, Cappadocia, Galatia, and Tarsus in Cilicia, and Antioch in Pisidia. There was Tyre, Sidon, Bostra, Petra, Palmyra, and Damascus, each a demanding acquisition under the stars, and in each there were garrisoned from 5 to 5,000 Roman soldiers according to the urgency of local demands. Scattered over all this and much more were the stars above and the glint of Roman armor below. In Judea, the night had long arrived, and beneath the brooding shadow of Masada, Pomponius Falco dictated a highly confidential communication. In the morning, the regular post would depart for Rome, and he was anxious his thoughts should find transport with it. He spoke very rapidly and in bunches of words, which made it extremely difficult for the scribe to keep pace with him. When he requested a repetition, Falco would frown and then speak as if to an infant, cutting each Latin word with exaggerated preciseness. Sometimes, to soothe his own impatience, he would reach out to caress the cheek of his young friend, Cornelius, who responded each time with an automatic smile. Falco was intrigued with the ironic relation between his present address and the recipient of his letter. Bernice, a Jewess. How convenient for Titus to have become so ridiculously enamored of the woman he would carry her slightest suggestion to his father as if her words were cut in stone. And how thoughtful of you to befriend such a remarkable bitch, who was no less than 12 years older than the heir apparent, had already been married 3 times and mothered 2 children. It was a stunning example of foresight combined with an appreciation of the feminine ultimate. To approach Vespasian directly was always difficult, and the results totally unpredictable, if only because he was the dullest of soldiers at heart, and his mind was that of a petty bureaucrat like his own father. Yet even he, so the gossip went, behaved like a rutting stag in Bernice's presence, most certainly it was not because of any attributes with which Juno might have endowed her. She was over-plump, indifferent to her dress, and careless of her hair. Yet everyone admitted she had an extraordinarily stimulating imagination, as what woman would not, who had so often in her youth fornicated with her brother? She was a true Oriental, sensuous and careful to exploit an air of the mystic. She was also sufficiently realistic to recognize the constant dangers surrounding her spell, and she was shrewd enough to know the more friends she had at the court, the longer might be her residence on the Palatine Hill. And I, dear woman, am pleased to be counted among your friends, your trusted friends, Falco mused. I am particularly appreciative of your efforts to obtain this present commission, and I shall continue to admire and adore you if you can manage to convey at least the essence of this letter to our emperor. I shall dictate the message in our sterile Latin, rather than in the Greek. We would both prefer, since it would be a pity if you did persuade Vespasian to glance at it, and then the uneducated boor would be unable to comprehend it. At first Falco had opened his letter with an un-Roman terms of endearment for Bernice, and then remembering what had happened to so powerful a man as Caecina, who had only been suspected of enjoying her sexual partnership, he told the scribe to strike out the flowers and leave only the vase. Besides, dear boy, he said to Cornelius, verbal pawing at any female, let alone that ghastly Jewess, is as repugnant to me as actual physical contact. Why should I even slightly risk my neck for something I detest? So the message began with simply her name, followed by his name. I am in haste to dispatch this because I am informed the next post from this wretched place will not be for 2 weeks. For the sake of brevity, I shall omit the hardships of my long journey, hoping to relate them surrounded by comforts suitable to a Roman patriot, while beholding a certain great and enchanting woman whom I have the temerity to believe is my friend. Therefore, I will first to the situation, which you will recognize as extraordinary. We are camped below a rugged mountain, on top of which are a band of thieves and murderers, who have terrified this region for years and utterly prevented the orderly restoration of peace and plenty to the surrounded territory. I am told, and I must warn you that it is most difficult to believe anything I am told here, that there are approximately 1,000 of these brigands, including their women, who are harlots torn from the streets of Jerusalem and other cities of Judea. You may well ask why it is that so famous a unit as our 10th Legion has not long ago made an end to this embarrassing situation. While I am certain numerous reports have been sent back which unquestionably would include military laments on the difficulties involved, the true facts cannot be appreciated until one is on the scene. The scribe who cuts this letter is my trusted retainer of many years, and you may be sure will not reveal a word of the following. Falco paused and studied the scribe for a moment. He had taken the name of Albinus when Falco had brought him, and had proved an expensive disappointment. His Greek lettering was positively archaic, and his Latin infuriatingly slow. Against these handicaps, Falco remembered that he had paid so much money for him because of his superb physique. Divided, he had not collected a dividend he had not collected because of the almost simultaneous attachment to his household of the lovely Cornelius Tertullus. There was now jealousy between the two, which would be more amusing, he thought, if it would blossom into mutual hatred. "How long have you been with me, dear Albinus?" he asked. 3 years and 17 days. And how do you know so exactly? You promised I would be a freedman after 5 years. Quite right. So I did. Well, well, you will be. Behind his half-hearted smile, Falco thought that he must have been mad to have entertained such a thought. Of course, dear Albinus, you represent a considerable investment, and I recommend the utmost discretion in your behavior if you expect me to bid you a fond farewell on schedule. For example, if word concerned with the present communication ever reaches outside years, you shall lose yours, among other vital parts. Cornelius also has a tongue, Albinus pouted. Indeed he has, Falco smiled. But you must remember he is not really here. Officially, you and I, plus our immediate retainers, are the only persons authorized for this expedition. He reached for Cornelius's neck and passed his fingers gently across it. I understand, said Albinus. Very well, then. Let us resume. Now, he said, completely changing his tone of voice, I must also beg you, dear lady, to treat this information with your usual discreetness. Falco turned to Cornelius and said, and a woman's usual discreetness is to limit the telling of any confidence to 4 people. He hesitated, pursed his lips, and waved his hand limply as he dictated again. It is with a sense of profound shock that I must tell you of the hopeless inadequacy of the 10th's present commander, who is most unfortunately also procurator of this land. Actually, the troops are leaderless, since Flavius Silva is drunk day and night. Only this morning I followed him from his tent to the base of Masada, where at enormous expense he is constructing a gigantic ramp by which he intends somehow to capture the handful of renegades now defying him. Only a mind utterly lost in the cup could have contrived of such a preposterous nostrum, and I assure you, Roman dignity, as well as our honor, suffers grievously every day. Who can blame the motley gang atop Masada if they laugh at the sight of some 20,000 slaves and 5,000 of our finest legionaries piling rock upon rock for what appears to be a staircase to the moon? The ramp must be seen to be believed. It rivals the pyramids in extravagance, yet it pales compared to the sight of a supposedly great Roman general staggering from his tent and then proceeding drunkenly before both his own troops and the enemy alike to view his imposing folly. I pity the man. He is worn out, perhaps the victim of too many battles. Certainly he should be replaced before he pins a medal on Bacchus and brings about a military disaster that could greatly damage our prestige throughout the East. Falco paused and wondered if he should bring up the matter of Silva's dalliance with Sheva. He decided against it. After all, his affair was strikingly similar to that of Titus and Bernice herself, and any comments thereon might be taken amiss. And Bernice, though totally won over to Rome and Roman ways, was still a Jewess. Who knew what retrogression she might make in defense of a tribal sister? No, he thought, there would be other ways to use the lever of Sheva when necessary. You both saw him? he said to Albinus and Cornelius. "You saw him limping along, ready to fall down any moment. Would you say I have been unjust?" "No," said Albinus. Cornelius simply shook his head. "Very well, then. Take this down." Falco cleared his throat thoughtfully, because now he must be certain to express himself with delicacy and yet be equally certain his ultimate impression was achieved. Bernice, Titus, and finally Vespasian must be led carefully into the resolve that a better procurator for Judea was already at hand. A Roman who would not consider it exile to govern such a state, but an honor. It was unnecessary, he thought, to suggest that a proper executive, say Pomponius Falco, would find ways to make these people a profitable acquisition. Forgive me if I seem presumptuous in feeling the gods are smiling on Roman fortune in Judea by arranging my timely arrival. Not only does our befuddled General Silva toy with moving mountains, he has also been in the habit of communicating directly with his enemies. I cannot adequately describe the sense of the shame I knew, and all my party knew, when we were obliged to witness our hapless representative dining to argue with a vermin-infested bandit. There stood our general, or I should say, there reeled our general, pleading with these wretches to surrender. After agonizing moments, I decided it was my duty to ignore protocol and take charge of the situation. It should be some indication of the general's condition to realize that he made not the slightest objection. Again Falco looked at Albinus and Cornelius. True, I did not hear him make any objection. Did you? Both young men shook their heads. Well then, in company with my aide and scribe Albinus, I addressed those people in a manner calculated to achieve results. It was not Albinus, it was I, Cornelius whined. I will not remind you again that you are not here. You were not officially authorized, therefore you do not presently exist. Then I just imagined all of that shit on my face? Falco reached for Cornelius's cheek again. He caught the flesh firmly between his thumb and forefingers and twisted it slowly. Sometimes you are worse than a child. Your peevish interruptions might be more amusing if we were merely passing time, but you will be finding your way back to Rome on foot if you continue to vex me. Falco twisted the flesh so viciously Cornelius was tumbled from his stool. When he began to pick himself up, Falco saw that he was weeping. At once he bent down to him and caressed the crimson welt on his cheek. Then he took him in his arms and, wiping at his tears, kissed him again and again. "Leave us," he said to Albinus. "Wait outside until I send for you." Three. 2. With the Zidon during the descent were all the family excepting Onan, a nephew, and Ishmael, another nephew, and Jetur, his third son, each having chosen to remain on Masada, in spite of their leader's pleas. There were also 11 other Pharisees, who came partly out of fear for their future if they remained on the mountain, and partly because Zidon was a Ben Hashaneseth, a station so high in the Pharisees any decision he would make would probably be right. Also choosing to join him was Ezra, the learned one, and this puzzled Zidon very much because they had never before agreed on anything. There were altogether 38 in the party, 2 fewer than Eleazar ben Yair had specified. The descent in the darkness was frightening to all, because of the treacherous footing on the serpent's path, and time and again the woman had to be rescued when the loose shale slipped from beneath their feet. When at last they reached the base of the mountain, Zidon started eagerly towards the nearest Roman camp, which was to the east. But Ezra caught his arm and said such a way led only to disaster, since the eastern camps were garrisoned with auxiliaries, with whom there could be no reasoning, and most certainly their officers were of like caliber. Therefore Ezra insisted they must make their way along the wadi at the northern side of Masada, and thence turn southward until they made contact with the Roman guarding Silva's camp. Now, Ezra explained in a voice loud enough for all to hear, we are committed. Our only hope is boldness. We must not throw ourselves on the mercy of some petty officer whose thirst for Hebrew blood may never be satiated. We have chosen to go the Roman way. Therefore, we must drive fear from our hearts, or at least from our faces. We must believe the Romans will take care of us. We must let them know we are depending on their honor for our protection. These were the things Ezra said to them in the starlight, and after vacillating for a time, Zidon agreed the flaring torches on the ramp better illuminated the western side of Masada, and might help to avoid a dangerous surprise. We will call out to them, and then show ourselves. You women will let them hear your lamenting. They trudged around the northern extremity of Masada, winding between the black shadows of tumbled rocks. As they progressed, the tiny bells worn by the women chinked with their movements, and there were continuous warnings and protests as one after the other stumbled or was caught in a bush of thorns. Later, the way soothed and their silence was broken only by their panting and the fearful whimpering of the children. More than 6 hours after their departure from the heights of Masada, Ezra said to them, "There it is." And they saw from an entirely different angle the great ramp of the Romans. It was now illuminated to them by 1,000 moving torches, and they whispered to each other that it reached to the heavens. Soon afterward, as they approached the circumvallation, they were challenged by a voice clearly audible in spite of the noise from the ramp. "Who are you? Signify instantly, or you are dead." Zidon replied gently, "We are Jews come down from Masada at the invitation of Vespasian." And Ezra added, "We will speak with your general Silva. We have words of importance for him." There followed a long silence from the other side of the circumvallation. As they waited, Ezra watched Zidon's tick become even more active in the torchlight. "Do not concern yourself with the future," he said. "It comes soon enough." Ezra saw the coins that adorned the veil of Zidon's wife reflect the torches, and he said, "If you hope to keep those adornments, I suggest you remove them now." Neither Zidon nor his wife heard him. They were both so locked in awe by the nearness of the Romans and the proportions of the ramp, they seemed incapable of movement. Even Zidon's tick had subsided, and his eyes were dead. There was the voice from beyond the wall again. "Come to the gate, one at a time. Keep your arms at your sides and your mouths at rest, or they will never utter a sound again." So it was that Zidon and all of his family, together with 11 other Pharisees, and Ezra, who was a Sadducee, gave themselves into the hands of the Romans. The first to greet them with the point of the spear was Plinius Severans, the legionary whose guard post they had approached. Behind him had gathered the balance of the guard, some 20 men, and Artorius, a centurion, and Cerilius, a young tribune. They listened in amazement as Ezra promptly violated the order of silence. "Oh," he said to Cerilius in the lilting Latin characteristic of Sicily, "I would wager 10 denarii a young man with a splendid face like yours must come from Masada." "Wrong, Jew. I come from a far better place. Give me the denarii now, or I will take them from you." "Alas, I took a gamble and lost. But would you be willing to double the amount, or cancel our wager? In spite of your esteemed emperor's promise for our safety, I have a notion that once we have left this wall, any treasure we may have will be confiscated, in which event you, who just met us, will see nothing of it." My dear God, Ezra thought, may the predilection of all Romans for gambling hold now. This doughy-faced young man, who is a tribune, though he has barely left his mother's tits, reveals a glottic stop in his enunciation of the word "give." He must be from Sicily, then. "We are agreed," Cerilius said. "Double if you are wrong." "Then you are from Lilybaeum, a most pleasant place. I spent a lovely month of April there, and am well acquainted with the bouquet of your western grape." Ezra knew he had won when the tribune pushed him back among the others. "Now I must plant the seeds," he thought. And there was so little time, with Zidon already sheep-herding us about, as if we were an officially appointed Roman overseer. Oh, how that miserable man will soon learn the utmost authority! Most of the legionaries were ordered back to their post, and Zidon's band was formed into a compact column. At least, when the group took on some appearance of order, they were escorted towards the camp by 10 legionaries, under the command of a decurion, and with the tribune Cerilius leading the way. They had not proceeded 10 paces up the rocky slope before Ezra's voice rang out in the most colloquial Sicilian. "I suppose all of you Romans know this place called Masada is accursed? Of course, your officers would have told you that. But have you been told how you are now living below the level of the sea?" The decurion, who was a giant of a man, turned to look over his shoulder. He said, "I warn you, Jew, keep your silence, or I will spill your guts in the sand." "And why not? I personally have changed my mind. I have decided it is better to die now rather than to have the juice that floats my testicles boiling with the heat. Do you otherwise intelligent Romans have any conception what it means to exist below the level of the sea during the coming heat? I, for one, welcome any quick death you may wish to administer. Crucify me, I beg you. How easy that will be compared to the horrible torture which I shall have to endure along with you if you insist on being merciful. Kill us. Do not spare us. We Jews who know this land understand what awaits those who insist on dwelling below the level of the sea, where the weight of the air presses a man into the ground." "Close your mouth, Jew. That will be done soon enough, because if my life continues for another month, then I alone along with every human being in this desert, Roman and Jew alike, will be forced to dig a hole in the ground and place my face down in it so I can breathe. And every day I must dig deeper and deeper to match the increasing heat until finally I am digging my own grave. If you will all think how we have more air above our heads than any other people in the world, then you will understand how we must soon be baked in a great pot. Ezra allowed his voice to fall away. He marched in silence, listening to the faint tinkling of the woman's bells, the sloughing of sandals along the path towards the camp, and the heavy sound of greased metal against leather, which came from the legionary beside him. The man has asthma, he thought. His breathing is too heavy for so young a man. I must try to help him toward an early death. Your breathing betrays you, he said confidently. Haven't you noticed how bad it is since you came to the desert? Ezra was not certain whether the man's grunt was an affirmation or denial. It made little difference. Wherever he went in the world, the man would be sure some other place was better for his breathing. You should go to the heights in northern Palestine. There would not be a worse place for any of you than below the level of the sea. Just before they came to the eastern entrance of the camp, Ezra raised his voice so that all might hear him. All of you Romans should observe the old skinful of bones who leads us. His name is Zidon, and he is a good man, if rather naive. He believes your great general is going to leave his tent and welcome him. Can you imagine anyone in this desert who does not know your General Silva is so full of wine at this time of the night he cannot even talk to himself? I am grateful to all your gods and my own that I am not a soldier whose fate will be decided by such a confused mind. How is it that men like yourselves will suffer such a certain and horrible death in this desert? For a drunkard. Please inform this old Jew the reason for this, and then I can die content. Go on, run me through, but have the goodness to tell me why intelligent men will follow this drunken buffoon, who left his ability somewhere in Gaul and his devotion between the legs of one of our women. How we Jews could have used such a military genius, one who would move one mountain to the side of another and walk up it over the bodies of his troops. The back of his escort's hand struck Ezra across the mouth, and for a time there was only the sound of his choking.